Got to say, only in just even a couple of days of being here, slowly but surely, while I still just want to turn around and look at every band and every trumpet that I overhear, it's a little bit, you just get used to it, like the noise of the police sirens in New York. As somebody who's been able to have great proximity to this whole operation, it is a phenomenal thing for Australia to be associated with and to be interrelated to, isn't it?
Well, I've always thought so. You know, people in Australia, there are some people in Australia who think that this is only a British institution, but that's just not right. I mean, of all the titles that she held, the Queen was most proud of being head of the Commonwealth, and King Charles succeeded her as head of the Commonwealth. And I can tell you, having met her and spoken to her about it, that the late Queen was just as committed to her role as the head of the Commonwealth, as the Queen of Australia and to her other realms, as she was to any part of her role.
When you had the opportunity to talk to her, what were the little moments that felt more than the platitude or more than what she's supposed to say to the bloke from Australia?
Well, you put me in a difficult position, Paul, because the conversations with the Queen are meant to be in the vault. But there was one occasion when she said something in a kind of semi-public arena, so I feel I can relate it. The last time before Prince Philip's death, the Queen did a public event was to come to the Air Force Memorial outside Windsor for the commemoration of the 100th anniversary of the Royal Australian Air Force. And it was a great compliment to Australia that this is somebody who receives literally tens of thousands of invitations. But she chose as her first post-lockdown commitment, which also happened by coincidence to be the last thing she did before her widowhood, to honour the Royal Australian Air Force and the aircrew who gave their lives in the skies of Europe during the Second World War. And I hosted her to that, and I conducted her around the cloister, in which the names are engraved on many, many tablets. And there were RAAF personnel who were embedded with Royal Air Force units who were at various points around the cloister, and I introduced them to the Queen. And there was one young servicewoman who was attached to an RAF base in the north of England, and the Queen said to her, you know, what do you do, where are you based? And the young lady told her. And the Queen, well aware, of course, that there was a boom microphone only a few feet away and that everything that she said would be picked up, very brightly replied, "Oh yes, I know your base. You're the ones who chased the Russians away."
Ah, fantastic! That's fantastic. Well, and so those moments where her knowledge about Australia, how contemporary is that? And is it a different flow of information than media because it's government information she gets?
No, she was completely up to date about Australian political developments, as she would be in the political developments of all the countries in her realm. I mean, one thing that is little appreciated about the Queen is that she had this fund of knowledge of politics. Not only the politics of her own country, because she was the symbolic head of state, but also the politics of the nations in the realm. And she'd met all the political leaders, she'd met all the prime ministers, the premiers were always welcomed to an audience at Buckingham Palace. And that was the case not just for Australia, but for Canada and for New Zealand and for smaller nations as well. So whatever else she was, and she was many things, she was a person profoundly knowledgeable about the politics of the nations of the Commonwealth. And of course she had this tremendous historical depth going back more than 70 years.
I love that as recently as this year, Governor-General David Hurley, they organised for a Zoom conversation with her with the Australians of the Year. And there she is, she's across everything of what they had to do and a genuine interest. And again, the ease with which distance and health and time and age could say, look, you know, I'm backing off a bit, I can't do this. But still wanting to be involved in a conversation with contemporaries, not sitting back and saying how great it was 10 years ago and 30 years ago, and I was the one who, you know, knew World War II people. She wanted to be seen, or seemingly wanted to be seen with people who are doing their life's work right now.
Well, because she was. I mean, this is somebody who never put her feet up to retire. It was so fitting that less than 48 hours before she died, she was actually at work performing one of her most important constitutional functions, and that is swearing in, or kissing hands, as the phrase is used in the United Kingdom, kissing hands with the new Prime Minister and inviting Liz Truss to form a government in her name. And the very last image people had of the Queen in the newspapers the morning before she died was of her, frail and old of course, but not looking sick, and with a very bright smile, shaking hands with her new Prime Minister.
It's been interesting to see the different phases of media interest, and it felt like yesterday, for some reason, Australia was the conversation, because our Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, had said we're going to not deal with anything to do with a republic till after the next election. Those of us that pay attention to politics as closely as we do, and everyone watching knows, well, he made that promise during a campaign, but that was actually news across many of the services here. Is it a constant question from people maybe in the media or of the left in the UK that their main interest in Australia is when Australia will change its constitutional arrangements? Because that felt very odd yesterday, that on the second, third day of all of this, we're running elbow talking about a republic.
Well, I think the Prime Minister has actually handled himself very well in this. And, I mean, he is well known for his Republican views. That's fine. He's entitled to those views. But I think the way in which he has been immensely respectful of the occasion and hasn't jumped onto it as an opportunity to prosecute a Republican agenda has been dignified and appropriate, and I think we should be proud of the way in which he's conducted himself. Now, when I was High Commissioner, I was often asked, not necessarily by people from the left, but just people who were interested in Australia out of curiosity, you know, is Australia going to be a republic one day? Because I think Australians completely underestimate the level of affection for Australia that British people have. Australians who live here, of course, don't underestimate it at all. I mean, the Australian population is a very, very big and visible element of the population of the United Kingdom, of London in particular. But Australians should never forget how much affection and sense of kinship British people have for Australia.
Oh, absolutely. And look, anyone, you know, even if I posted a photo of Instagram of me being here, straight away, the family members that I hadn't seen for 10 years, when you're coming over, when the interrelated, interpersonal relationships that we all have to this part of the world are well and truly obvious. Thank you for all of your service, and nice to talk to you. Thank you very much.
Nice to see you, Paul.
Thank you, George. Thank you very much.